Good evening. This is a regular meeting of the Princeton Planning Board. It's Thursday, March 3rd, 2016, and the opening statement is as follows. Pursuant to Section 13 of the Open Public Meetings Act, adequate notice of the time and place of this meeting has been given by prominently posting the 2016 agenda resolution of the regularly scheduled meetings of the Princeton Planning Board. Such notice has been placed on the official bulletin board at the Princeton Municipal Complex and is to be maintained throughout the year by transmitting a copy of such schedule to the Princeton Packet, Town Topics, The Times, Trentonian, and Comcast Media. A copy has been filed with the Clerk of Princeton on the 9th day of December 2015. Legal notice of the adoption of said resolution appeared in the November 13, 2015 edition of the Princeton Packet. Would you call the roll, please?
Ms. Burge, Ms. Capizzoli.
Here.
Mr. Cohen.
Here.
Ms. Krumiller.
Here.
Mayor Lempert.
Here.
Ms. Spruill.
Here.
Mrs. Trotman.
Here.
Mrs. Ullman.
Here.
Mrs. Gunning.
Here.
Mr. Quinn.
Here.
Mr. Williamson.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Are there any announcements? Anyone? Yes, Mayor Lempert?
The Princeton Council is going to be holding a special meeting a week from tonight on Thursday, March 10th. We'll be considering the introduction of an ordinance to designate the Witherspoon-Jackson neighborhood as a historic district, and if that ordinance is introduced, it'll be coming to the Planning Board for review.
Thank you. And that's at 7 o'clock?
Yes,
Okay, thank you very much.
in this room.
In this room. Anyone else? Any announcements? All right. In your packet, you should have had a copy of the minutes from the regular meeting of June 18th, 2015. Did anybody have any additions, corrections? Anyone? All right.
I'll move it. Krumiller?
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Krumiller. Second.
Mildred Trotman.
Who seconded? Ms.
Mildred
Trotman? Right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. And that brings us to the first hearing on our agenda. Mr. Schatzman, did you want to speak to that, please?
Good evening, Richard Schatzman, attorney for the applicants.
Yeah.
George and, thanks. George and Susan Stein. We would ask that the board take jurisdiction. I filed an affidavit of publication.
Mr. Schatzman,
Yeah.
we'd like to swear in all our witnesses, whether or not you're giving testimony.
I'm going to ask for a continuation. There's no need for that.
Could we state for the record, this is the Stein application you're referring to?
Yes.
Thank you.
And it's a minor subdivision?
Right, correct. I just want to ask whether the affidavit of publication and affidavit of service is in order.
Yes.
Okay, so the board can take jurisdiction. I would ask for a continuance until April 21st. I've given an extension to the board. Mr. Porter sent me an email just recently that requires planner's testimony about a site part of your subdivision ordinance, and it was I didn't have enough time to get a planner, so I need that time to get a planner.
Okay.
So the board is taking jurisdiction on this application, which means, and it's being carried specifically to the meeting of April 21,
That's correct.
2016, which means there will not be another notice of that. This notice was adequate for putting it on tonight's agenda, and we have therefore taken jurisdiction, and that will be carried without further notice.
That's correct.
Right. Do we need to vote on that or anything? Okay, fine.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If anyone's here on that.
And if there was anyone here for that application, it will be heard on April 21st.
So your neighbors.
Okay. The second item on the agenda tonight is Zaid and Nadia Hadaya. This is a minor subdivision at 289 Jefferson Road, Block 7009, Lot 3. And
Mr. Chairman? Chairwoman?
Mr.
Sorry.
Cohen?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention I need to recuse myself because I'm in the 200-foot radius as a neighboring property owner, but I will be sitting on the hearing and actually speaking on behalf of myself as a property owner.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so the record will reflect that Mr. Cohen has recused himself, and Ms. Catronio confirms that Mr. Cohen is a notice property owner within the 200-feet radius, which means under the municipal ethics law that he doesn't give up his rights as a private citizen to protect his own interest and is able to testify and present evidence to the board.
All right. Mr. Solo, do you want to outline what we're doing tonight and go over the application?
Mr. Solo, in this application, do you swear or affirm to testify truthfully?
I do.
Thank
Thank you, and good evening. What I'd like to do is just give you a brief summary of the staff reports that you've received and a little bit of background history on this application. As the chair indicated, this is a minor subdivision application for Zaid and Nadia Hadaya at 289 Jefferson Road. The subject property contains approximately 32,500 square feet, or around 0.746 acres. It's located on the east side of Jefferson, between Valley and Terhune. All of the surrounding properties in this area are residential, and they range in lot area from 0.29 acres to about 3/4 of an acre. I'm going to be speaking using the minor subdivision 289 Jefferson, sheet 1 of 2, and I have labeled it as PB1. Let me orient you. Hopefully you can see the coloring. At the bottom, this is Jefferson Road. Terhune Road is to the left or at the top. North goes to the left. The property is in the R6 zone, which permits single-family homes on quarter-acre lots, or lots that are 10,890 square feet. Excuse me. Briefly, there's one existing lot with a house. I've outlined that in black, and I'm tracing it now. It's a rectangular in shape, and what the applicant is proposing to do is to create two lots, and I'm showing the proposed subdivision line. It's in red on this drawing, and I'll just trace it. It's like a zipper, or it zigzags in and out in order to provide two lots. New lot 3.01, which is the lot towards that's larger towards the front, will contain 17,334 square feet. A new house will be constructed at some point in the future. And then lot 3.02 will contain 15,165 square feet and also have a new lot. As I indicated, the lots do zigzag. The plan shows a proposed house for lot 301 will be located to the front, and for 302 located towards the middle or back third of the property. Recently, the board's attorney has pointed out to the applicant that in our ordinance under 10B-182, under our design guidelines for subdivisions, it states that insofar as is practicable, side lot lines shall be at right angles or radial to street lines. This application was first reviewed by the board's minor subdivision committee on February 16th. The subcommittee heard the application and withheld its approval with the intent that the applicant come before the full board. During the subcommittee's meeting, many of the board members present expressed concerns regarding the lot configuration, the location of the proposed homes, and the impact to the streetscape and the neighborhood character. At that meeting, the applicant indicated his willingness to address some of the concerns. However, most of the modifications that were discussed or could be discussed would require a variance, and only the full board can grant variances, not the minor subdivision committee. At the minor subdivision committee, the members asked the applicant to present an alternative if he so chose tonight. Also, by way of background, when the minor subdivision committee meets, if it does not have a unanimous vote for an approval, it automatically comes to the board. We've recently had one or two applications like that where that has occurred. I'm going to try to summarize Mr. West's comments as well, the municipal land use engineer. Mr. West is also sitting in as the assistant zoning officer tonight. Mr. Bridger had an emergency and couldn't join us. However, Jack is the assistant zoning officer as well and has talked to Derek as well as I regarding some of the issues with the subdivision. Briefly, the engineer asks that the roof leaders and sump pump, if you approve the application, be tied into the storm system, that the applicant will be required to comply with the municipal stormwater regulations for any new construction that is proposed, that a tree removal plan be submitted prior to construction, that the driveways be a minimum of 5 feet off of any property line, and then he raised a concern regarding the driveways and sidewalks location in regards to there's a large tree in the, I guess, the northwest corner of the lot, as well as some grading concerns in being able to maintain handicap access with the sidewalk and the driveway. That's a brief summary of the staff reports. If there are any questions for me or Mr. West or Jack, did I leave anything out that you wanted to highlight?
Yes. Mr. West, do you swear or affirm to testify truthfully?
I do.
Thank you.
The only other comment that we had was the configuration of the lot that has that one piece to the back. It's kind of it's obviously it's an odd-shaped lot, but there's a part of it that's kind of no man's land, and I just asked the applicant to explain why they have the lot lines in that configuration. It kind of doesn't make a lot of sense from a usable yard area.
Thank you. Are there questions for either myself or Mr. West?
Yes. Go ahead, Mr. Trotman.
To be clear, if the developer built the units or if the lots were shared just as they are shown on that chart, there would not be any variances needed?
That's correct. This application is variance-free, which is why it was at the minor subdivision committee.
Right.
Yes, Ms. Ullman?
But it also seems clear in that configuration that the setbacks, the standard setbacks on the street would not be met by the house in the forward lot.
That's correct. Well, it meets the zoning requirements.
I understand.
However, as you can see from the two houses next to it, they're set back quite a distance more than what this one is proposed to be.
Yes, go ahead, Ms. Cormillan.
I'm sorry, can you repeat what you said about the right angles?
Sure. There is a section in our subdivision standard, it's a design guideline, so it doesn't raise to the level of a variance. And what that says is, let me get my notes right, and it's 10B-182 that says it, and it says, insofar as is practicable, side lot lines shall be at right angles or radial to the street line. So it's talking about the right angle here. Normally, we would prefer the right angle to continue. I think what's going to be before you is that insofar as practicable, because what they've done is, in order to avoid a variance, have a number of breaks in the line.
Well, does practicable mean in order to avoid a variance or in order to make a good design. I
I
mean,
think that's going to come back to you to make that decision. And I'm sure the applicant's going to provide an opinion as well.
Mr. Sower, could you also, we should put on the record that this configuration under the ordinances that exist today would not be permitted.
That's right.
Can you explain that?
The municipality recently amended the land use code in the former township, and what it was before, for lot frontage, in almost all zones, the lot frontage was half of the lot width. Lot width is measured at the setback line, lot frontage is measured at the street line or along the street. So in this zone, with a 100-foot, I believe it's a 100-foot lot width requirement, it only needed 50 feet of frontage, which is why the line was drawn here. So both lots, the rear, the one that will have a house in the rear and the one in the front, meet the lot frontage requirement. They would not meet it today, because this application came in just before that change.
Lee, just to clarify, the required lot width is 85.
85, thank you, Jack.
Let me also explain, just there's been a change in the state law over the last couple of years, or several years ago. The rule used to be what was called a time of decision rule, where a board such as our planning board would apply the ordinance as it exists at the time the application is presented and heard by the board. Under a change in the land use law, the state law has now moved to what's called the time of application rule, and the measure of what ordinances apply is the set of ordinances at the time the application was filed. And this application was filed before the change of law took effect.
That's correct. Thank
Change of ordinance took effect.
Okay. Ms. Carlin, did you have another question?
I'll wait for later, thanks.
Anyone else?
Good evening. My name is Eric Goldberg with the firm of Stark & Stark, and I do have some questions for the board's professionals. If the board would prefer, I could ask them now, or I can reserve the right to just ask them later.
You certainly have the right either. Well, let's finish the board part of this, and you certainly have the right to ask the staff questions. So let me just swear you in, since it's our practice to swear in anybody who may lapse into giving testimony. So, Mr. Goldberg, do you swear or affirm to testify truthfully, and would you state your name and your relationship to this application?
The answer is I do. Good evening, everyone. My name is Eric Goldberg. I'm an attorney with the firm of Stark & Stark here tonight on behalf of the applicant.
Okay.
Are there additional board questions?
Anyone? All right. I think if there are no more board questions and nothing more, Mr. West, then I think we're ready to hear from the applicant.
Would the board prefer that I put on my witnesses first and then reserve the right?
That's your choice.
Okay. Then let me just ask a couple questions. Mr. Solo, you had mentioned Section 182.
That's correct.
Okay. Has that ever been used before in this township to restrict this municipality, to restrict the ability of an applicant to create a subdivision analogous to this?
I believe we discussed it at a couple of minor subdivision committees and urged applicants to try to have straighter lot lines.
But were there instances where the applicant required relief from the board for that section in which the board granted that relief, or alternatively, where an application was denied because of that section?
I don't recall any.
Okay. And how long have you been associated with either the borough, township, or the municipality of Princeton?
Approximately 20 years.
Years, okay. And has Section 182 been part of the township code during those 20 years?
To the best of my knowledge, yes.
Mr. West,
Yes.
do you recall Section 182 ever being used to deny an application like this?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. And how long have you been associated with the borough, township, or municipality?
Approximately 5 years.
Okay. And obviously, the ordinance, Section 182, has been in effect this whole time.
As far as I know, yes.
And just going back to Mr. Solo for a minute. Prior to approximately 10 o'clock this morning when Mr. Porter sent the email, has Section 182 or the concern of Section 182 ever been communicated to the applicant before, to the best of your knowledge?
I don't recall whether Section 182, I do know staff did meet with the applicant and suggested straight lines would be better.
Absolutely, and certainly the applicant understands that, but it was never predicated upon Section 182.
I don't believe we raised that at the time.
Mr. West, do you ever recall discussing Section 182?
No.
With the applicant?
No.
No further questions?
Do you want to call your witnesses and go for?
Yes. Bob? Actually, if I could, before I call Mr. Gonzalez, I would just like to just kind of briefly just summarize this. I know Mr. Solo did that, but just, if I could, get a couple thoughts on the record, just so the board understands a little more the history of this.
Can we get Mr. Zally seated at a microphone at some point, too?
Okay, there you go. Initially, the applicant began to meet with some of the professionals of the municipality in the fall of 2015, approximately September. Certainly, it was always known that the zigzag lot was not favored by the municipality. That is beyond dispute. The applicant was aware that what ultimately became Ordinance 2015-39 was going to be enacted. Obviously, there were readings before and prior to it being enacted on December 7th. The applicant certainly knew it was coming. On December 7th, that afternoon, around lunchtime, the applicant proceeded to file an application, the application that you see here before you. And obviously, the applicant intended to get it in before Ordinance 2015-39 became effective. At the time, the applicant attempted to file an alternative plan and was advised that that really was not the way to go. The alternative plan basically showed less of the zigzagging, but required some relief. So what was filed was what you see before you tonight, which is a fully compliant plan with the ordinance in effect at the time on December 7th, 2015. Subsequently, later that evening, Ordinance 2015-39 was enacted. And if I could, I'm just going to briefly read some of the salient points of 2015-39. Whereas the zoning regulations for minimum lot frontage to properties located in the residential zoning districts of the former Township of Princeton are often half of the minimum lot width requirements for those same zoning districts, and whereas in several instances, this has resulted in unusual lot configurations with zigzagging property lines and development in undesirable locations. And what I'll do is I'll mark Exhibit 2015-39, and that will be Exhibit A1. The point of that being that, clear as can be, the municipality was looking to correct what perceived as a flaw in its ordinance regarding zigzagging lots and to prevent them from being built. And that is understood. However, the applicant filed its application prior to this ordinance coming into effect. It cannot be a position now with a municipality saying, well, maybe Section 182 precluded it, and then you're enacting 2015-39, which clearly was designed to preclude zigzagging lots.
Are you presenting testimony or argument?
Well, I'm just kind of going through the history and the logic, because the whole logic of this was the applicant understood that it had to file prior to 2015-39 being enacted.
And you're not challenging whether 10B, that the existing 182 was the law at the time the application was filed?
No, I am not challenging. 182 has been around for decades and decades. Nobody's challenging that. Its interpretation is being questioned, but no, certainly not that. On January 19th, the application that's before the board tonight was deemed complete. The applicant was then sent to the subdivision committee. The applicant advised the subdivision committee that no notice was required because it was only looking for a minor subdivision. Minor subdivisions do not require notice for the 200-foot list like other type of applications, and that's clear as can be. Nonetheless, the applicant agreed to file, to submit notice because it didn't want to get into an issue of jurisdiction. But the applicant did that. And the letter detailing that dated February 1st will be marked as Exhibit A2.
Just to be clear, the ordinance of Princeton does require such notice. You're not challenging that?
No, I'm not challenging the fact that the ordinance of Princeton requires it. What I am questioning is that provision in Princeton that does require it violates the MLUL. But the fact that it's written in Princeton's ordinance, no, that's a separate issue. The applicant appeared before the subdivision committee on February 16th, and as noted, discussed the fact that it is a zigzag lot, as the board can see. The applicant certainly understood that it is not the board's preference, and the applicant, as Mr. Solo talked about, presented alternative plans that it wanted before this board. That doesn't negate the fact that it's a totally compliant lot. The applicant understands that this is totally compliant, but still wants to work with the board to come up with something that hopefully works for everyone. And then finally, Section 182, which was mentioned, in the email from Mr. Porter this morning, and, as noted previously, the applicant doesn't believe that that's applicable, and we will get more into that as the testimony progresses. So at this point, what I have marked is Exhibit A1 and Exhibit A2. We'll also submit Exhibit A3, which is a letter dated February 19th, talking about how the applicant did submit an alternative plan if the board wished to consider that. However, certainly, this is fully compliant. And with that, I'll present my first witness.
Yeah, if I may, I just want to clarify the reference to my email this morning. What you said is correct. I guess in looking at this and preparing for this hearing, I had a recollection that there was some applicable design standard that had not, that might be relevant and that I recognized had not been raised as part of the formal review process of this application. So I sent an email this morning which reads, although not previously raised, it appears that Section 10B 182 of the former Township Code may be relevant to the discussion of the two subdivision applications on tonight's Planning Board agenda. This ordinance design standard reads 10B 182 side lot lines, and Mr. Solo read it before, I'll read it again. Insofar as practicable, Side lot lines shall be at right angles or radial to street lines. By this email, I am making Mr. Schatzman and Mr. Goldberg aware of this section. They should be prepared to discuss the legal implications of this section as it affects their respective applications. I'm also copying David Cohn, who has filed an appeal with the zoning board. So this was an issue that admittedly was not raised before. The design standard is there, it's before the board, it's whatever it is and whatever the board decides, its relevance and application, but that's some of the background that should be part of this as well.
And, well, Alan, do you want to swear all the witnesses in together or just one at a time?
Do them all together.
How many do you have?
3.
Why don't we just do them all together?
Let's do them all together. Chair suggests. I guess would you each individually, one at a time, starting with Mr. Ghazzali, state your name for the record and spell it?
Right. Robert Ghazzali, Gazzale, with Fisk Associates, project engineer.
Ziad Hadaya. I'm Ziad, Z-I-A-D.
You speak in the mic.
Z-I-A-D. Hadaya, H-A-D-A-Y-A.
Just a minute. You have to hold the microphone right up to your mouth, please.
Okay.
And repeat what you said.
My name is Ziad Hadaya. I am the owner of 289 Jefferson Road. I swear to tell the truth.
Well, I'll get to the swearing in a moment.
Yes, Tom Stearns with Stearns Associates, it's S-T-E-A-R-N-S, professional planner.
You gentlemen, do you swear or affirm to testify truthfully to the extent you're providing testimony tonight?
I do.
Yes.
Let the record reflect the answer was affirmative.
Thank you. Bob, if you could, please state your name and address for the record.
Yes, Robert Ghazzali, Fisk Associates, 631 Union Avenue, Middlesex, New Jersey.
And you've previously been accepted by this board as a professional engineer.
I have.
I don't know if you want to go through additional voir dire.
We accept his credentials.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, Mr. Solo did a thorough job describing the proposal. I'll just take a couple of minutes to describe the existing conditions on the property. Again, it's 289 Jefferson Road. The property is 100 feet wide by 325 feet deep, 32,500 square feet. It's currently improved with a single-family home and stone driveway. Jefferson Road is fully improved. All the utilities exist within Jefferson Road. We have had a fire flow test conducted by New Jersey American Water, and the flow is adequate to meet the requirements of the zone. The lot generally slopes from north to south, or as you're looking at the plan, from left to right. There are a number of trees located to the rear of the property and a couple of sparsely placed trees in the center, and some rather large street trees closer to Jefferson Road. Some additional information on the proposal. We are proposing a common driveway easement which would be located along the southerly property line, so we wouldn't be looking for an additional curb cut. So the regrading within the right-of-way and that for an additional driveway would not be required. The lots are conforming to the R6 zone. Lot 3.01, the forward lot, would contain 17,334 square feet with 50 feet of frontage, and the lot width is 88.7 feet. The rear lot, 3.02, is 15,165 square feet again with 50 feet of frontage, and the lot width is 85 feet. Whatever utilities are required, water, gas, electric, as I said, exist in Jefferson Road, and they would be extended to whatever homes may be developed on the property.
And Bobby, if you could, using, I don't know if you want that marked as Exhibit A1, Alan, or it's already, oh, I'm sorry, A5, I guess.
PB1.
PB1, okay.
Do you want to go through Jackson?
Well, we'll go through that in a second. If you could, just, if you could, please just describe in a little more depth what's been marked as PB1, and then also go into the engineer's review memo.
Okay. Okay, well, PB1 is a modified version of the plan that we submitted with the application. Highlights the lot lines as been described. It's a zigzag lot, which does conform to the requirements of the zone, and that's basically it as far as the lot layout is concerned.
Are any variances needed?
No, it's a conforming subdivision. Yes. Would you like me to go through Mr. West's memo at this time?
Please.
Yeah.
Just one question. You talked about a modified, a copy of your modification of your plan. Was it just the color added that's the modification?
Modification, and Jefferson Road is legible from a distance. So regarding Mr. West's memo, we'll start with recommendations. Number 1, well, first I would just say that we would comply with all of his recommendations. I don't know if you'd like me to go through each one individually.
Go through each of the comments, please.
Okay. So recommendation number 1 is to connect the roof leaders and sump discharge for both lots into the municipal storm sewer. We agree to that. Any development would have to comply with the township stormwater management, the former township stormwater management ordinance. We would agree to that. Item 3, iron pins would be set at the new property corners. We agree to that condition. Addresses for the new lots, lot 3.01, the forward lot would be 291 Jefferson Road, 302. The rear lot would be 287. Descriptions for the new lots would be submitted for review by the land use engineer, approved by the planning board attorney, and then filed with the county. The applicant would provide one corner of the plat tied to the New Jersey State Plane Coordinate System and the National Geodetic Datum of 1988. No problem. No tree removal on either lot would be permitted without filing and receiving approval of a tree removal permit. Item 8, to reduce the impact on adjacent Lot 2, the proposed driveway for Lot 3.02 should be a minimum of 5 feet off the property line. We would agree to that, and in fact, both lots would have that condition. Item 9, the sidewalk at the driveway apron would be concrete. We agree. Item 10, as I discussed, we would be proposing a common driveway, so there wouldn't be a new driveway for proposed Lot 3.01. Item 11, access to Lot 3.02 is only 13 feet wide. We are proposing a 15-foot wide common driveway easement, so that condition would be eliminated under the new construction. There is a graphical error. The rear property line of proposed Lot 301 is shown as being 4904. It's incorrect and should be 4994. I agree, and we'll change that. We require outside approvals from the Sewer Operating Committee and the Mercer County Planning Board. And 14, a road opening permit will be required for any work done within the public right-of-way, and a cash bond posted with the municipality, and we agree to that.
And Bob, as has been discussed, the plan certainly contains some zigzagging
line.
Yes, it does.
The plan was proposed that way, why?
To be a conforming subdivision, the zigzag lot line arrangement is necessary under the prior zoning.
And then, just going briefly, you heard conversation about Section 182.
Right.
And if you could just provide some thoughts on that?
Well, 182 is, to the extent practical, the side lot line should be perpendicular to the street or radial to the street. Under the prior zoning, it wasn't practical to use that configuration, as that would not yield a conforming subdivision. So for that reason, it was not practical for us in our situation.
And also, you have been involved with this project for several months. You are the one who who prepared the plans, and you were certainly involved with the project well before the December 7th submission, correct?
Yes.
And this morning was the first time you were ever made aware that it could even possibly be a concern from the municipality, the Section 182?
Right. It had not come up prior in either the review memos or the site plan committee meeting. That's true. Just to talk a second about the zigzag and what results from that, for the front lot, a house width could be over 58 feet and a depth in excess of 60 feet. Of course, restricted by the FAR, but there's a reasonable building envelope. Same thing in the back. The house could be 55 feet wide, and the depth could be up to 60 feet as well. So the zigzag configuration does not severely limit the building envelopes of these lots.
And as had been mentioned previously, the applicant is certainly willing to discuss alternatives with the board, with the understanding that the only way for that to happen, for the alternatives to happen, would be if a variance were obtained.
Under current zoning, yes.
Okay. Under the current zoning.
That's true. And we did prepare an alternate plan. I don't know if these were circulated to the board or not.
No, I don't think so, and
I do have reduced copies that I could
I
pass.
think that would be helpful, since it's a little difficult to read it off the board.
And we're up to A4, I believe, Bob?
I'll mark that.
We'll mark.
Yes, mark that, and
Sure.
would you continue to use the microphone?
We may need to share, sorry.
While we're doing this, Mr. Goldberg, do you have copies of A1, 2, and 3 for Ms. Catronio, our planning board secretary?
Oh, absolutely. And also, while we're doing that, one other exhibit I forgot to mark, A5 is a letter dated December 19th. A letter dated December 19th regarding the application. So,
This was A6.
no, that's A4. A4, I just introduced A5.
Oh, absolutely.
board's ready.
Yeah.
And Bob, the whole purpose of Exhibit A4
Right.
was just to give the board an alternative, correct?
Yes.
Again, certainly the application and the plan that has been marked PB1 is certainly still in play, and that is what is before this board tonight.
Exactly. At the site plan committee, there was some discussion, is there a way to eliminate some of those zigzag lines? So we produced this alternate plan. In this scenario, both lots would have 50 feet of frontage, and each lot would have, well, the rear lot would have a 100-foot width, and the front lot would have an 88.7-foot width, and the areas would be closer to each other. So the front lot would be 15,660 square feet, the rear lot 16,840 square feet. The access would still be the same. They would still both utilize a common driveway along the southerly property line. The conditions of Mr. West's memorandum as to sump pump discharge and those items would still apply. The major difference is the lot areas and the fact that the zipper effect, the zigzag effect, has been eliminated.
And again, a variance would be needed from this only if it's interpreted under the new ordinance. And when you say the new ordinance, that's the ordinance enacted December 7th.
Right, these lots would have insufficient frontage.
Okay. But if this new plan were deemed prior to December 7th as the old ordinance applies to it, then would variances be needed?
In my opinion, no.
Okay.
Just to be clear, you keep talking about the committee that heard this before, and that was this minor subdivision committee, not the site plan board.
My apologies.
Mr. Porter?
If you could just, perhaps for the board as well as the members of the public, in a different color, show the lot lines. It's hard on what we see here, and I'm sure it's hard. That's, anybody have any ink?
Ink, but I don't have a highlighter.
Okay, I don't know if that helps.
Does anybody by any chance have something a little darker? Anybody?
There you go.
Okay, great. All right. Thanks, Lee.
Oh, that's it.
Okay. Is that a flag lot? This is what I'm going to ask you if that's a flag lot.
It is.
So there are more other variances in frontage.
It's got a kick at the bottom. It's a flag lot with a kick at the bottom.
Hopefully that's a little better.
A question, is that a flag lot under the municipal ordinances?
I don't believe so. Derek, I guess, would make that ultimate.
No, that wouldn't be considered a flag lot. It's still, under the old ordinance, it would be a conforming, it doesn't meet the conditions of a flag lot.
It does meet the...
Well, I don't believe it meets the conditions of the ordinance for a flag lot. This is the first time we're looking at it, so I don't, and I'm not looking at a scaled plan.
Okay, so I guess, are you familiar with the Princeton flag lot ordinance?
mean, one of the conditions for the flag lot, you have to show that the pole of the flag can be 50 feet wide and the lot's still conforming. They can't meet that condition. I don't know if they meet the area condition. It's got to be 3 times the lot size to be a flag lot. So I don't believe it would meet the conditions in the ordinance for it to be a flag lot. It looks like a flag lot.
You know, I'm sorry to interrupt, but why are we looking at this exactly?
Well, the applicant is telling the board that if the board doesn't like the zigzag line, there is a possible alternative configuration that requires variances. And I take it the variances you identified where the front, under the current ordinance, is frontage is inadequate.
Yes. Right.
And if the flag lot requirements require the pre-existing unsubdivided lot to be 3 times the size, is that what it is, of the
Yes.
zone?
That's true.
Then that is also a nonconformity.
Right, lot area would be an issue as well.
And just to clarify the question that was just asked, that's it, let me add something. Certainly, the application marked PB1, that plan, that is before the board. That's compliant, but clearly there are concerns about...
But, I mean, it's complying, but if you believe that 182, like you keep saying, but you're relying on saying that 182 doesn't apply, right? When you're saying it's complying.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct, absolutely. I don't believe 182 applies, or I don't believe 182 applies for multiple reasons, but yes. And then that plan is being shown as an alternative. And also, just to follow up with something Alan said, if it's believed that this is kind of just a minor amendment to what was initially submitted, this can be viewed as being applicable under the old ordinance.
It's, I think, a big if.
Well, can I follow up on that right now? Or, I mean, because I think that's pretty crucial.
Let me just jump back. I don't think that's correct, because even under the old ordinance, this doesn't meet the lot size for a flag lot, so it wouldn't be conforming under the old. It would be perhaps conforming as to other issues, but not as to if it's a flag lot.
Right, I just think the only thing is that I don't believe it is a flag lot, but I think we're getting a little far afield.
But the thing is, I think it makes a big difference, because first we have to decide if the first one, if we think that's not actually allowed, then it's a different decision, right? So it seems like we have to decide if, you keep saying you have to ignore that the provision about the right angles, like you have parallel lines, and you're saying you just have to ignore that because you didn't use it before, and I just learned about it, and you keep... I want to hear from our lawyer, like how legally are those arguments that say that we can't use those guidelines that say side lot lines shall be at right angles, when those are parallel lines? I mean, it seems like we have the kind of the power right now to say the first one doesn't apply. But you're saying that we don't, so I think we have to get that straightened out first.
Well, I guess just to address that, Section 182 has been around for decades and decades, and no one has interpreted it as...
But does that, legally, does that mean we can't use it?
I guess you asked a couple questions, one of which was, has that section ever been used to deny a subdivision like this? There haven't been very many like this. There's only one, and it was not used at that point. That was not in play, but this was still, perhaps it should have been, but it wasn't. So when you ask whether it's been applied in an application like this, there haven't been many except one, and 2 others that are pending. So that, in addition, there's no record as to how often 10B-182 is ignored in the applications that come before the board. Most of the applications the board sees, and I believe are conforming more or less to the to 10B-182. So the fact that it's never been used, it doesn't mean it doesn't apply. It's there. Your experts presumably reviewed the Princeton Code when they prepared this application as well, including design standards.
I would also just point out that it seems interesting that Ordinance 2015-39 was enacted to avoid zigzagging lots. If Section 182 was potentially able to prevent zigzagging lots, it seems like Ordinance 2015-39 is perhaps superfluous.
Well, we can ask staff if the frontage requirements does anything more than prevent zigzagging lot lines.
I'm not sure
well, let me just say, I think we can, the reference just now was that the only purpose of that was to avoid zigzag lines. What does that ordinance do?
The new ordinance.
The new ordinance is to make the lot frontage equal to the lot width.
And does that have application in situations broader than zigzag lot lines?
Yes, it does.
So it's not fair to say that it was superfluous if 10B-182 applies?
That's correct.
Then if I could, just one kind of follow-up question for that. Why is one of the things noted in the whereas clauses of that ordinance talking about how there have been zigzagging lines and how clearly the municipality wishes to prevent those in the future?
Can't speak for Township Committee, but I think it's clear that the application that was approved with the zigzag lot line called attention to the fact that the frontage requirements permitted, or arguably permitted that, and they were addressing that in that context, but it's not it may have been the impetus, but it's not its only reason.
I've been on the planning board for 6 years, and I didn't want, sometimes I forget things, and so maybe I've been forgetting that we've seen one of these, but the only one that I can remember is the one that caused the council to do the ordinance. I don't know if other people remember other zigzag lots. I'm not on the minor subdivision committee.
Should we let the applicant?
Sorry? Well, why don't we do you want to finish with your people?
I'm finished unless there are questions.
No further questions for this witness.
Maybe just one question for him. I guess I may be asked it indirectly. In your preparation of these plans, did you review the design standards of the ordinance?
Yes, I did.
And were you aware of this section?
The flag lot section?
That's in the design standards ordinance?
Yes.
So you were aware of this section when the plans were prepared?
The flag lot section?
No.
What section are you asking, Alan?
10B-182.
Yes, I was.
Thank you.
Yes.
Just one more follow-up question for your engineer.
Sorry, Bob?
Earlier in your testimony, you were talking about the shared driveway. Is that only an option with the alternative plan, or was that an option with the other plan?
That's an option with the other plan as well.
Okay, and where would that shared driveway be? Or is it in the same location as the alternative? Because it doesn't show up on the plan behind that one. Because that plan shows two driveways, right?
We're talking about whether PB1 shows one driveway or two driveways?
Well, PB1 shows two driveways.
Two, yeah.
No, we indicate a 15-foot wide common drive easement. What's shown here are utility connections to the front lot. Maybe.
Please state your name and address for the record.
Tom Stearns, Stearns Associates, 12 Seabrook Road, Stockton, New Jersey.
Yeah.
And if you could, just get
One second, Mr. Solo and Mr. West are huddled. Are you satisfied with that last response?
Yes.
Thank you. The response says to the shared driveway being in the original application?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Yes, I've been practicing in the Princeton area for 30 years. I'm a licensed professional planner, landscape architect. I've testified before this board many times.
Okay, we accept your credentials.
Thank you.
as a professional planner.
Yes.
Tom, have you had a chance to review this application?
Yes.
If you could you please describe your thoughts to the board?
Yes, I'd like to just go through a series of exhibits. I'd just like to show some of situations in this R6 zone where there are other irregular lot lines, just for the benefit of the board.
And I believe we're up to A6, Eileen?
These down.
And if you could,
A6.
what, we'll call that A6.
Could you describe what A6 is?
Yes, this is a portion of the zoning map of Princeton Township. This is the, this red bar here is the subject lot on Jefferson. Just to orient you, this is Nassau's over here. This is Route 206. This is Harrison Street, and this is Valley Road right here. And this heavy black line, this is all the R6 zone, and the applicant's lot essentially is right in the heart of the R6 zone. So what I'd like to show you are some, I'm going to zoom in on some tax maps in the R6 zone and just show you some of the various irregular lot lines. There's a number of other lots, combination of flag lots, where you have, I'll say, deviations from 10B 182, the side lot lines. And just briefly before that, I just want to mention that, you know, I think my interpretation is what's practical. Again, this doesn't say side lot lines, need to be at right angles or radial. It's when it works practically. My interpretation that this is more of a guideline and not an absolute that would require a variance. But that's my opinion.
And when you say variance, you really mean a design waiver. It's in the design waiver section. And basically, would it also be your opinion that it's really not practicable for the side lot lines to be at right angles or radial to street lines in this instance?
Correct.
Could you explain that answer? Because it would create a variance? Is that what your testimony is?
Yes. Okay, this is another exhibit. This will be A7. This is a Princeton tax map, sheet number 70. This red area here is the applicant's lot. And just a little bit by way of history, this is 126 Valley Road. This is the site that was subdivided that has the two quote Dutch barns on the site. And this was the site that was originally received a subdivision approval for a zigzag lot that originally, I guess, caused all those issues. But that's this location right here. So And just one other point I wanted to make. This is, the applicant is on Block 7009, which is bordered by Valley Road, Terhune, Walnut, and Jefferson. The average lot size in this block is .37 acres. The applicant's lot is one of the larger lots in this block. It's at 3/4 of an acre. So the applicant's lot is a lot larger than the other lots on this block. And then I just wanted to point out further up here on Jefferson Road, there's additional lots. There's a flag lot right here, which is Block 7007, Lot 3.02 and 3.01. Also, it doesn't show on the tax map, but adjacent to that, Lot 4 is also a flag lot, and the corner lot has an adjustment on it that doesn't reflect on the tax map, Lot 5.01. So those are some irregular lots where you have essentially side lot lines that are essentially parallel to the street.
And Tom, all those lots that you mentioned violate Section 182 if interpreted?
Yes.
Certainly, okay.
But could you just clarify, are they flag lots?
Yeah, I would say 2 are, and I'm not sure what this other one is.
And are you aware of the Princeton ordinance allowing flag lots?
Yes.
And that specifically allows that type of configuration, which, in other words, having lot lines that are parallel to the street, that are division lines.
Well, I don't think there's anything in the ordinance that specifically states that. I mean, I guess that's one of the ironies of the section we're talking about, of Section 182. I mean, I would interpret that as a broad general design guideline that would apply to any lot in the township. That's my interpretation. Bear with me a minute here. There's also, again, another exhibit, which is, this is A8.
A8.
This is tax sheet number 71, and this is another lot. This is just south of Valley Road off of Jefferson, block 7112, lots 3.01, 3.02, again, where there's, I'll say, irregular lot lines.
And when you say irregular, ones that
Don't comply with Section 182. I think that's, I think those are enough examples. Sorry.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
About what you just did?
Yes.
So, but all of the, like, adjacent properties that are on the map that in here, they all apply? I mean, they all are, they're not the flag lot, or are there any that are, like in this, they're not, the ones that don't comply aren't close to this house, right?
You mean,
I mean, this property.
Within the 200 foot.
You're asking me if all these others are conforming lots? I don't know that off the top of my head, but I'll just say generally they look like they're conforming.
And the examples that you gave they're not very close to that property.
Jenny, to just answer your actually, two of them do show up on the key map. To the left-hand
that one,
side in the
okay.
center on Jefferson. You see lot 3.02
Okay.
and 3.01.
Okay.
So I guess my point of this exercise is just to point out that there are other irregular lots within this zone district within the neighborhood. That's all.
And for those lots, it's not like Section 182 ever came into play for them.
Correct. Yeah, and I just, just from some of my own experience in the township, I know when we worked on Pondview, which was, over 20 years ago, I'm thinking of the multifamily units had kind of, not the single-family subdivisions in Pondview, but the multifamily had, somewhat irregular kind of lot lines that were, a lot of zigzag back and forth, but maybe that's just particular to those lots for the multifamily. But again, just, again, I don't think that ever came the Section 182 that I recall, I don't think that ever really came up way back when.
And regarding the language of Section 182, is that fair to say that that is almost boilerplate language that's in many ordinances?
My experience is a lot of the ordinances are, it's a shall versus a conditional. This strikes me as more of a kind of a guideline or a preference, like, where you can, where it's practical. We'd like to see, straight lines and, right angles. I don't take it as if you don't do this, you need a variance.
Okay. Or in this case, design waiver.
Right.
And part of what you said earlier as to why it's not practicable to do this, would that also include part of the reason being that it really, you don't believe, would impact the overall aesthetics?
I don't think so. I mean, whether it's I'll say a flag lot that's, graphically drawn as the flagpole and the flag versus something that's on paper, more of a zigzag. When the houses are built out in the field, you're still going to have a house in the front, and you're going to have a house in the back. You have that already in this R6 zone. I don't think it's a big aesthetic issue.
Previously, we had marked as Exhibit A1, which is a copy of Ordinance 2015-39. And in it, it contains language, whereas in several instances, this has resulted in unusual lot configurations with zigzagging property lines and development in undesirable locations. In your opinion, as a professional planner, would it be fair to say that clearly one of the goals of 2015-39 was to eliminate zigzagging subdivisions?
Yes, it seems that way.
Okay. Otherwise, they wouldn't have added that as a whereas clause.
Yes.
Okay. And logically, if there was a means to do that prior to Ordinance 2015-39, that language wouldn't be in Ordinance 2015-39.
Correct.
Just in the preamble?
I'm sorry, what'd you say, Alan?
Is that the preamble language that you're reading?
For me or for the witness?
No, the whereas.
He's asking what you were reading.
In the whereas clause, yes.
So that's not part of the codification.
I'm sorry, what'd you say?
It's not part of the codification of the ordinance. It's just the whereas.
It is setting forth
If when that gets in the code, that language won't be included, I assume.
I don't know. Also, you had started your involvement with this project fall 2015?
It was like around Labor Day, I think, so either late August or early September.
And again, this is the first time today that you're hearing about the potential applicability of Section 182?
Correct.
Could you repeat that question? I couldn't hear it.
Sure. Something to the effect of, today is the first day you are hearing about the potential applicability of Section 182.
But what does that have to do with, I mean, why is that relevant?
Because the application has been proceeding for months and months and months, and Section 182 has never been discussed, mentioned. There has not been a scintilla of evidence. There's not a scintilla of any indication at all that Section 182 is being interpreted as is potentially being interpreted tonight, and all of a sudden, after months and months and months of this, and quite frankly, after decades and decades of it not being interpreted a certain way, it is suddenly coming up this way on the eve of the hearing.
But that's not really talking about the substance, it's just talking about, you know, it doesn't really say why we should not take it into account. If we see that, it doesn't really, those factors that you're telling me that you didn't see it and that no one else was talking about it, it doesn't really, does it really affect whether or not we can, is that really an argument that we should ignore it?
Absolutely, because there is certainly, it's not a question of we didn't see it. It had never been interpreted this way. It was seen. A municipality can't interpret an ordinance for X for decades and decades and suddenly come around and
but like we said, we haven't had very many of these zigzag lots, so it's not, we haven't been doing it for decades. Go ahead.
Mr. Quinn?
I would question the accuracy of that statement. While I didn't know the code, the section, I referenced the preference in the subcommittee meeting. It was the start of a conversation. I think my colleagues can confirm, and if you want to read back the record, you had a court reporter in the room for that application. I think it was made clear, at least from my standpoint and from my colleague's standpoint, that it was articulated. Now, did I know Section 10B 182? No, I didn't reference it by name, but I talked about the board's preference with regard to this. So the notion that you're hearing this for the first time tonight, I don't think is accurate.
If I could just address that, I don't disagree that there's been a preference, and I think it's been acknowledged from the very first thing I said. It has been clear as can be that the board has expressed a preference well before we spoke at the subdivision committee meeting that it does not prefer zigzag lots. That is beyond dispute. No one is challenging that, and that has been acknowledged, ad nauseum here tonight by me. No question at all. The issue is that now, on the eve of this hearing, it's being alleged that Section 182 perhaps restricts the ability to have that, and perhaps we need a design waiver in order to have this be a subdivision. That is the issue, and that is a separate issue than what you are saying. Certainly the board has always, and everybody has always had a preference not to have the zigzagging, not disputed.
Yeah, I know when we met, we had a pre-app with, I guess, Lee and Derek, they expressed
I can't hear you at all.
I'm sorry. Can you hear me now? I just have to have your mouth right on the microphone. Sorry. I know when I met with Lee and Derek, they brought up the fact that they didn't encourage the zigzag lot lines, but I don't recall that Section 10B 182 was ever specifically mentioned.
Right. There's a difference between not wanting it and having an ordinance that perhaps requires relief to have it.
Did you have, Any further testimony?
I think you covered it, but just to make sure, from an aesthetic standpoint, the application or the plan that's marked PB1 is appropriate and certainly will not impact the community.
Yes, I don't think there's really any negative effect on the surrounding properties or damage to the character of the neighborhood. I mean, there are other situations where you have, houses in front of other houses. I don't think it's a problem.
Wait a minute, could I just ask you, when you're talking about houses in front of other houses, you're not referring to the prevailing setback, the fact that that any house built in this lot configuration will be further forward than the prevailing setback, is that right?
That's true.
And so that's one of the things that will change the streetscape
For the worse.
Well, we'll change it. I mean, I think through
But
Princeton, you
as
have...
a planner, you're not bothered by that?
No.
Okay.
Really, no further questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Would it be possible to take a 5-minute break at this point?
I think your reporter would like that.
Great.
Take 5 minutes.
Okay, so oh no. Okay, it's good. It's good to know. Okay. So it's on now, right? And it's off.
the other one. Yeah.
Those two, these two, you don't want to, yeah, because it's. It's a big day. Right before the
They didn't want to. And that's
Do we, okay, there's Mr. Goldberg. Okay, could we come back into session, please? Could you all take your seats? Mr. Goldberg, are you ready?
Yes. And the next witness, if you could tell the board your name and address for the record.
My name is
If you could use the microphone, please.
My name is Ziad Hadaya. I'm the owner of...
Mr. Hadaya, we cannot understand you. You're going to have to remedy the situation
Yeah,
before
my
we
name
can
is
record it.
Ziad Hadaya. I live at 289 Jefferson Road.
Okay.
And you are the applicant?
Yes.
Okay. Could you just describe for the board the process of this application, the submittal, and the whole process?
Okay. I noticed in a lot adjacent to my lot, building going on. We have the pictures of the two houses.
Okay, that's going to be marked as Exhibit A-9.
Yes.
And it's a picture of, is that 126?
126 Valley Road. So I came to the township to find out how did they approve the subdivision. I met with the township, I got copies of their blueprints, and I found out that the zigzag lot line was approved by the township. So I made a copy of my neighbor's blueprint, and I put it on my blueprint, my vacant lot. Since the township approved my neighbor, I thought I will naturally be accepted. We met with the township either August or September to test the water. I met with the planning and zoning officers. Basically, during the meeting, I showed them few ideas of other alternatives for the zigzag lot. However, I was surprised to find, after my meeting with them, a new law was going to be created with the zigzag lot, so I have to work fast and hard to get an engineer to draw my ideas before the law become adopted. I managed to put a tentative plan just before the law went into effect. And I remember being here in December asking you to postpone the adoption for 2 weeks so I can get it in, but you didn't allow it, so I paid extra to get my plans ready for the township. During the conversation with the township's officers, we did look at different ideas. Some concepts were sort of, to me, acceptable to them, but I didn't present them because I want to go with the sure thing. The sure thing is my neighbor got approval. So I don't want to test the water when there is a deadline on an application that may or may not succeed. So I took the application that was successful. I spent lots of money, lots of effort to make sure it's almost exactly what my neighbor got approval for. And I made a deadline when I came to give the applications at the township. I have alternative plan that doesn't have much zigzag line. However, I was told, make up your choice, we only take one. They refused to take an alternative. My alternative does not, one of the alternatives was my alternative now. I wasn't allowed to present it in time. Have I been allowed to include it? I should have met the deadline, and I didn't need any variance. But they told me I'm only allowed to put one. She called, during this process, she called the township lawyer, and we had a really hard time and difficulties getting the application even accepted. And it all has to do with the deadline. I have to get my lawyer on the phone, go back and forth. Finally, they accepted my application and only one version, and refused to take this. Did you bring them to the board? And that's what I did. I bring my alternative, but they were with me at the time of presenting the original application. But I was afraid if I give them the alternative, they may say, find ways to deny it. So I accepted what my neighbor got his approval for, and I used his.
Okay. You had showed Exhibit A9, pictures of 126 Valley Road.
Okay.
If you could describe what you are looking to develop on your property and perhaps contrast it to what's marked as Exhibit A9.
Okay. Just I forgot to mention, we got confirmation from the engineering department that our plan is conforming to the law before December 10th. And they made recommendations, has to do with it, to make the subdivision less zigzagging than before. And I came with the alternative plan, which I gave them, was the one that I brought with me initially and was refused to take. The Valley Road subdivision, my neighbor was not only given approval for the zigzag lot, but he was given a huge variance, and that is to give him a frontage of 62.5 feet instead of 85. What I'm here for today is just asking for some fairness and maybe some minor help because of what happened as a result of my application not being accepted to be taken from me. I'll tell you what I find bad about those two houses at Valley Road. Number one, they are too high. I'm willing to give concessions to the township that can go in the deed to make them happy with the type of subdivision we'll make. So I agree to a height limit no more than 25 feet. The houses appear too big for the small lots he have. I would agree to limit the size of the houses to what is allowed with the FAR ratio. They look exactly the same, the two houses. I would agree to a condition that our houses will look different from each other. They look too close to the street, the two houses here. I agree to keep the first house on the same location it is now without coming toward the street.
Right.
To keep the house at least 75 feet away from the street.
You understand that we're just doing a subdivision here. We're not doing sort of the site plan. You're dividing the lots and showing us where the building envelopes are, and I think this is probably all very interesting to the neighbors, but you're talking about conditions that are not necessarily a part of this.
Mr. Goldberg, could you limit this to what the issues are and explain, or if these are part of the issues, explain to the board the testimony?
No, I think what Dr. Hedaya was trying to demonstrate is he understands that the board had concern after the erection of the houses on 126 Valley Road, and that he is not looking to do anything analogous to that at all. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
And that aesthetically, what you're looking to do is something far more appropriate.
And I intend to keep the houses not as it shows all the way back, so they line up with the other houses, and it will blend with the neighboring community, with the other houses next to it.
And I think that answers the question.
Well,
I just need to read them this. Yeah, sure. Okay. Thank you for listening to my application. You need to know that I have owned this lot for many years, and that I relied on the decision by the zoning officer and your engineer and planner that the lot arrangement was permitted with no variances. It is a matter of fairness for you not to arbitrarily refuse to give me an approval when the owner around the corner got the same relief only last year. I acknowledge that you changed the rule in December and that no one else will be able to seek this relief. But that doesn't mean that I should be denied approval where I filled my application before the deadline and before the rule changed. I have offered a number of concessions that I could accept to avoid a negative aspect of the houses on Valley Road, and I think they are all fair and avoid those problems. But I have now spent a great deal of time and a great amount of money on this, and ask only that you treat me fairly.
No further questions of Dr. Hedaya.
okay, thank you very much.
And I just have one or two follow-up questions, if I could.
Okay.
Just to make sure the record's clear on something, Mr. Solo, we had talked about Section 182, and I know, and I think you had indicated that you can't recall it being used, or to the best of your knowledge, it was never used to deny an application, or relief was never sought from it. That's correct? Okay. How about for any other application, not necessarily ones that are analogous to this, anything else involving a side lot line that runs parallel to the street line?
I don't remember the board taking action. As I indicated, we've always advised applicants we would prefer a straight lot line.
Okay, but, and Mr. West, I guess same question, do you recall for any lot involving a street, and any lot involving a side lot line that runs parallel to the street line, if Section 182 if relief was ever obtained from that section, or it was ever used to deny anything?
I'm not aware of any applications that were denied because of that.
Okay.
Are you identifying applications where that would have been applicable?
Yes, any applications.
Are you aware that there were applications where that would have been applicable, other than perhaps the one that Dr. Hedaya pointed to, the A9?
Well, certainly the ones that the planner went through, where he knows of at least 7 instances where it could have been, where it was applicable, yes.
And many of those were flag lots, he testified, I believe.
But I think, and Tom, you could also correct the record, I believe the point is that that section 182 would have been applicable no matter what the lot was.
Yes.
Could I clarify the record also as to the Valley Road lots and the reference that the zigzag lots were approved by this board? Technically, that is not correct. Those were presented to the Minor Subdivision Committee, which had difficulty with that issue. The board and the applicant at that time, or I should say the committee and the applicant agreed that the applicant was willing to bring that application to the full board, as is this minor subdivision, if the Minor Subdivision Committee voted to approve the zigzag lot. So the Minor Subdivision Committee approved it on the condition that the applicant come to the full board with an alternative plan that might involve a variance. And what you see was the alternative plan with the variance. So in fact, the only approval of a zigzag lot was as leverage for a variance and a conditional approval by the subdivision committee. That didn't change anything, but that just for the record to be clear as to how that proceeded.
All right, if you have no more witnesses, I would really like to get to the public.
I'm sorry, I have a question. I'm sorry, this is maybe out of order, but I think we need a little clarification on what a flag lot is, because we were told that this is not a flag lot, but then other lots nearby maybe are flag lots. And just what's the definition of a flag lot? Does it have to be a certain size?
In this case, because it has the required frontage, it was not considered a flag lot. The original application meets the frontage requirement of the ordinance before it was changed, so that's why it wasn't a flag lot. It looks like one simply because you have a house in the front and a house in the back, but our definition includes that it doesn't have the frontage.
But I'm sorry, but the other instances he pointed out, like there's another one on Jefferson, those are flag lots, or?
So are flag lots allowed? Is that what you're?
Flag lots are allowed. We developed standards specifically for flag lots. Some of the ones he pointed out, you'll notice it had an angled line so that it met the frontage requirement. I'm not certain if they were treated as flag lots or not off the top of my head.
So
but
if it doesn't
general,
have...
if it has the frontage requirement, it's not really a flag lot.
Just historically, we were finding that there were some tortured frontage issues in applications that were presented involving something that looked like a flag with a pole and a lot in the back. And because those were tortured, the ordinance was changed to not require that torturing, but to impose other conditions. So some of the lots, I'm sure that can be identified as so-called flag lots, predated the change in the ordinance, and some are afterwards. And I guess under the new standards, there's a requirement that the lot be greater than twice, or maybe it needs to be 3 times the underlying zoning in order to be a permitted flag lot. But other flag lots were permitted before that, without that requirement.
Can I add one more thing? I forgot to say it.
I'm sorry?
Can I add one more thing I could say about the property I own?
We can't understand what you're saying.
The property I own on 453 Jefferson, I own a property on 453 Jefferson. On 2008, I subdivided. It's not a flag lot, and it doesn't meet it. It does violate the 182, and it went through the board. 453 Jefferson has a frontage of 42.5 feet, which make it not a flag lot. And I passed it without even raising the issue of 182. So you gave it to me 8 years ago. I don't understand why in the middle you didn't apply it in 2008, now you're applying it again. I was the one who benefited from it.
I mean, the board's going to, you've stated that the board will take that into its consideration.
Okay. Any other board questions? Anyone? Yeah. Let me open. If you'd like to come forward to the microphone, give your name, be sworn in. You have about 3 minutes for each of you.
My name is David. Is this on?
Sort of.
My name is...
Oh, I'm sorry.
My name is David Cohen, and I actually am going to beg the board's indulgence. I'm going to go a little bit over 3 minutes, but I think a lot of the other neighbors are going to defer to me, so hopefully it won't add to the overall timing of the public discussion. I have some backup information I'm going to hand up to the board. I have 11 copies, so... And basically, that's just the testimony that I'm going to give and a reduced copy of this diagram that I'm going to be referring to.
I just want the record to reflect that Mr. Cohn is a member of the planning board. He's recused himself earlier tonight. His testimony is that as a neighbor, his testimony should not be given any greater weight because he is a member of the board than any other member of the public.
That being said, I would actually like to request that I be qualified as an expert. I am a licensed architect in New Jersey, have been practicing for 25 years, and have appeared before this board and before I was a member of the board and other boards in neighboring communities to testify on such applications. Any chance I can get qualified?
Sure.
Okay. So
let me, I guess we should clarify that you are testifying as a neighbor, not as a representing a neighbor.
That's correct. I am not employed by a coalition of neighbors to represent them.
You happen to be an architect, but you're a neighbor and testifying in that capacity?
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. So what I'd like to do is, first of all, point out that you've heard from a number of different people tonight that this is a conforming application, that it does not require variances, this zigzag lot line. And that, in fact, is the determination that Derek Bridger, the zoning officer, made when the applicant approached him. My appeal to the Zoning Board of Adjustment, which Mr. Porter made reference to earlier in his email, is actually taking issue with Derek's interpretation that this is a conforming lot. And basically what I'm appealing is his reading of the definition of lot width. So I'm not disputing that these lots meet the requirement for lot frontage in the zone, but I am disputing that they meet the requirement for lot width. And I'm going to walk you through it. It's a little involved, but it's very clear-cut. And I think once I get through it, you'll appreciate that really it's not a conforming application. So if you look at the definitions in the ordinance, the first thing you have to look at is the definitions for a side lot line. The definition in the ordinance reads that a side lot line is defined as a continuous line which runs back from an intersection with the lot front line and which forms a boundary line between the lot and the adjacent parcel of land. Okay, so side lot line has to intersect with the front lot line, and it has to be continuous. Those are the two characteristics of a side lot line. A rear lot line is defined as any lot line except a front or side lot line. Okay? So anything that is not a side lot line, anything that does not intersect the front lot line and is not continuous, is therefore a rear lot line. On this diagram, I have marked the side lot lines in pink. These two are side lot lines, and this 25-foot segment is a side lot line. I've marked the rear lot lines in yellow. This is a rear, 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 and this is a rear. It's very clear in the definitions in the ordinance. Moving on from there, how do you measure lot width? Lot width is defined in the ordinance as the distance between the side lines of a lot, measured along a straight line lying between the required front and rear building setback and making equal angles with the side lines. So we can only measure lot width between side lot lines. We can't measure lot width between a side line and a rear line. This is the only location where we can even potentially measure the lot width. The lot widths that are shown on the applicant's drawing are not technically correct. Even the ones that I've shown in red are not correct either because they're not between the front setback line and the rear setback line. They're actually in front of the front setback line. I would argue that the way that these lots are drawn, there is no way to draw a technically correct lot width. All right, so in cases of ambiguity, and I would say that this is not ambiguous, but in cases of ambiguity, I would argue that the zoning officer should be trying to determine the intent of the ordinance and make his interpretations based on the intent. In order to determine the intent of the ordinance, all you have to look at is the definition of a flag lot, because these are just deformed flag lot layouts. They've been deformed to try and take advantage of an error in interpretation by our zoning officer. But essentially, they're flag lots. They don't meet the requirements for a flag lot. And I think that this board is entirely justified in totally rejecting this application, welcoming the applicant to come back with another application for a variance, whatever they think is the best way out of their lot, be upfront about the nonconformities, and ask for the relief that they need to develop the lot in the way that they want to. But to come in and claim that something is, which is not conforming, to claim that it is conforming and to try and get permissions based on that kind of misinterpretation is, I think, incorrect. I know the one other thing that's in play tonight is that we've heard, or I've heard, that the clock is ticking on these applications, and we have to act on them, or you have to act on them in short order. Unfortunately, my appeal to the zoning board won't be, there's not an opening on the schedule until April 27th. So we won't have an answer, obviously, in time for you to use it in making your decision. But there are two things you can do. You can ask the applicants for an extension in hopes of getting clarification. And of course, if they're confident that their interpretation is correct, they should be happy to have the Zoning Board of Adjustment behind them and agree to that. If they're not willing to agree to that, I think the very least that I would ask is that if you feel you have to approve this, that you approve it with the condition that if the Zoning Board of Adjustment comes back and interprets the ordinance the way that I do, that the approval would be void. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else?
Can I ask a question?
Yes. Mr. Cohen, Mr. Porter has a question.
The board tonight's been talking about 10B182, and you're referring to a definition that talks about a continuous line.
Yes.
Do you have any input for the board as to
Yeah,
whether those
so,
are related concepts?
I'm not 100% sure how closely related they are. I will say that continuity in a lot line, what does that mean? Well, it can't be referring to, don't use a dashed line, right? That would be just absurd in terms of a lot line. The only way that I can understand the inclusion of that word continuous is that it means, a line segment that doesn't change direction. And as soon as it changes direction, that it's no longer continuous. So thank you for giving me an opportunity to clarify that.
Okay, thank you. Do you want to give your name, get sworn in?
Okay. My name is David Mickelson. I live at 281 Jefferson Road.
And to the extent you're providing testimony, do you swear or affirm to testify truthfully?
I do. So the diagram here conveniently shows you the layout. I live here with my wife. The barns on Valley Road are replacing the Franks' former residence here. I'd like to briefly thank the planning board for arranging to not have a house in front and a house in back in this lot. A similar solution for the 289 subdivision doesn't present itself because the lot is just not wide enough. And there's no way to put, I think, two houses on this lot without one in front and one in back. We're not happy with that. I support, and my wife supports, David Cohen's interpretation of the ordinance concerning the side lot line, and therefore the difficulties with the width. I hope that becomes the official view. If it does, and applicant submits something like the alternative, or really any other arrangement that still involves putting two houses on this lot, we're still not happy. But maybe there's not a lot we can do about that. If any of these plans are approved and we wind up with two houses, more driveway and so forth area covered, fewer trees in the back, we have the usual Princeton runoff problem. This is a hill. I live downhill. That's essentially the main reason that we're not happy with the application. When we bought the house, the neighborhood didn't have the flagpole lots up the street on the next block. It didn't have the two barns here. It was a rather different neighborhood in 1992. We hope you can try to keep the town a little bit more the way it used to be and prevent these high-density minor subdivisions. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
I believe we didn't mark this exhibit or give it a marking. Can we call it DC1? If you could state your name for the record, please.
I'm Kip Cherry, and I'm a neighbor.
To the extent you're providing testimony, do you swear or affirm to testify truthfully?
Yes, I will. I'm also a licensed planner. Okay. I agree very much with David Cohen's interpretation. I think the zipper configuration violates the definitions provided in the ordinance under Section 10B-241. A side lot line must be continuous, and I would concur with Mr. Cohen that a zigzag lot line is in reality a series of corners made up of sidelines and back lines, and therefore it is not a continuous line as required by the ordinance. I would also like to say that I don't believe these two lots conform with the flag lot requirements, and I would note also that the flag lot requirements were changed after the flag lots that Dr. Haday has referred to were created. So they are not under the same requirements as we would have today for a flag lot. I'd like to point out that our neighborhood was laid out as a rational place, originally under the vision of Mr. Terhune, who owned the original farm, and then the vision of Mr. Loomis and others in the 1920s, and that the lots were generally accompanied by deed restrictions to enable the vision to go forward. In terms of planning principles and as a practical matter, the neighborhood is defined with clean corners. The zigzag configuration really creates a muck of the general layout of the neighborhood, and if you put a fence up, you would have to have a surveyor to put the fence up because you wouldn't know where your lot lines were. And that would create a very ugly configuration in the neighborhood of having this zigzag fence. I think the beauty and character of the neighborhood is very germane to our discussion, and I feel that really this whole configuration is a contrivance to avoid going to the zoning board for a variance. I also feel that it creates besides violating the character of the neighborhood, it creates a dangerous precedent in terms of the increase in density of the neighborhood. Now, while you might say that, okay, it's just one more house, but it is doubling the density on that particular lot, and I think that's a very bad precedent for our neighborhood. Also, the 50-foot setback is a very, very important thing along Jefferson Road, and I don't see how the house in the front would make the 50-foot setback, which is a very clear planning unity along Jefferson Road of having all the front facades 50 feet away from the street. Also, I'd like to point out the stormwater issue, which has been discussed a little bit, but the houses on Loomis Court have been really hit very hard by stormwater, and unfortunately, one of the residents of Loomis Court had to leave, but we do have another resident here who has been suffering with stormwater problems, and he lives right behind those two barns. And the stormwater slides south and ends up in on his property. And it's a very bad situation for him. Finally, the bulk of the rear house on Loomis Court, I think would be substantial in terms of their privacy, their freedom to use their backyards, and their expectations when they purchase their properties. So I don't know whether do you want to just say who you are on Loomis Court? Okay, he's not ready to do that, but he's very concerned about stormwater. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Yes, please.
My name is George Stein. I live at 149 Terhune Road. We are the applicant that was deferred to, I believe,
Yeah.
April 20th.
Mr. Stein, I'm having trouble hearing you. You're going to have to speak.
My business?
I can't hear you.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Name is George Stein. I live at 149 Terhune Road. I am the applicant for the minor subdivision that was deferred pending getting a planner for April 21st. And I'm not here to discuss...
To the extent that you're going to provide testimony to the board tonight, do you swear or affirm to testify truthfully?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm not here to discuss the application that we have pending, but just to make one comment about the issue of continuous lines. Now, I'm not a planner, I'm not a zoning officer, but I do have a master's degree in mathematics from Columbia. And a continuous line can be made up as many segments as you like. The definition of continuity that was advanced here tonight, it may be true in zoning, but it's certainly not true mathematically. And I just would like to make that comment. That's all.
Yes. Briefly.
Yeah, I'm not a professor of math, I'm a professional physicist. A continuous line in geometry is, as he says, and it would in fact include rear lot lines, front lot lines, everything on the whole thing. So I think the mathematical definition has serious problems when applied to a zoning.
Okay. Anyone else?
My name is... Is this on? My name is Jonathan Bessler. I live at 32 Dempsey Avenue, which is the property immediately behind the property in question, so we share a rear property line. I fully support what David and Kip have been able to present from...
I need to ask you if...
Oh, I'm sorry.
If the testimony you're giving is true to the best of your knowledge, then you swear that that's the case, or affirm?
Affirm?
Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have to repeat all that again, or can I start from where I left off?
Just go on.
Okay. So I live the property right behind, fully support what David and Kip have presented. I do believe that from a aesthetic standpoint, this certainly does change the look and the feel of the neighborhood. We purchased our home in 2010, certainly much more recently than David and some of the other neighbors have, but even the look and feel of the neighborhood 6 years ago was different than it is now. And so any way that we can continue to preserve that, from a personal level, we undertook a very significant project at our home. We have beautiful windows in the back, and so looking in our backyard and the extensive backyard that is currently in place, that's one of the reasons why we not only chose the property, but chose to stay in the property and do some renovations, to the best of our ability. Also, from a stormwater standpoint, I believe one of the gentlemen who was sitting here, I forget this guy's name, had talked about the slope of the property and how that slopes from this perspective left to right. It also slopes front to back, and so from a stormwater standpoint, all of that water not only flows into the back of the property in question, but also into my property, and I believe Kip's property during some of the extensive storms. Both of us experienced significant water in the basement. I did extensive work to remediate some of that, however, with two additional potential properties, two potential additional houses on that property, could create even more stormwater runoff issues. I don't know if everyone knows, but there's an easement in the back of the property that sort of collects all this. However, based on the other slope, and I'm not a planner or a geologist, but the water just sits there. And so certainly if there's any type of extensive building, we would certainly request that there's even more remediation done to remove all that stormwater from the property. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dartha Hopkins, I live at 288 Jefferson.
And to the extent you provide testimonies for affirm to testify truthfully?
Yes, I
Thank
do.
you.
And we can't hear you.
Yes, I do.
And
Dartha Hopkins. Yes, Dartha like Martha. Okay, I just want to agree completely with what Kip and what David said. I'm totally in agreement with that. Also, excuse me, I'm representing my neighbor next door who had an emergency with a medical emergency right before and couldn't come. And down the street, neighbor next door is Carolyn Lewinhoek, and then
I
down the
think you
street.
can only testify for yourself.
All right, just to
Thank
say
you.
there are others, we all feel very strongly this way. And that's it.
My name is Roxanne List, and I live at 280 Jefferson Road.
And you swear or affirm to testify truthfully?
I do.
Thank you.
So I actually do agree with David and Kit as well. And for me, this is all very interesting, but the aesthetics of the neighborhood is really important. And as many have said, this is the reason we moved to where we moved. And I just want to maintain that character. You see the big barns, those do not belong in our neighborhood. To have one house in front of another, that does not belong in the neighborhood. And we really just want to preserve the neighborhood in its entirety as it is, not to say that there can't be changes, of course, but there's no reason to add density. That's the reason we moved where we did. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Julia Hughes, H-U-S-E, for the record.
To the extent you're providing testimony, you swear or affirm to testify truthfully?
I do.
Thank you.
I live at 25 Kyler Road, and the idea of two houses going, one house coming down and two houses going up it doesn't go with the neighborhood, and I just want to sort of second what the neighbors have said. We love the neighborhood, we love the character, and we don't like the idea of sneaking in two houses where one house is. And I understand that the other two that got postponed are the same idea. So I just want to acknowledge, and thank my neighbors for speaking on our behalf. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? No?
If the testimony from the neighbors is done, I just want to recall. If the testimony from the neighbors
Just
are
wait,
done.
wait a minute, and I want to make sure that we've gotten everyone, people. Anyone else want to say something? Before we go on, could you say something about the stormwater problems that people have brought up, Mr. West?
Sure. One of the conditions in our memo is that the roof leaders and sump pump for both houses be tied into the storm sewer system, and then they meet the stormwater ordinance. So that will not eliminate the problems that the neighbors are having, but it'll definitely make it better, and, obviously not worse. But the roof leaders and sump pumps will be tied into the storm sewer system in Jefferson.
Okay, thank you. All right. Before I close the public portion, did you want to say something?
I just wanted to add, can I talk about the stormwater real quick? Is it
Okay, come on up.
immediately there and has an issue. So in the project that I just completed, the town requested that I do the same thing, tie in all my leaders. We even added some additional grates in our yard to collect any other standing water that wasn't either falling on the roof and exiting. However, I don't know if it's this particular area, but the back of the yard still receives a lot of standing water, and I think, Dr. Hidayah, you don't live there, right? So I don't think you see it as much as the rest of the neighbors do. But any significant storm, I probably have in some spots up to a foot of standing water until it eventually evaporates or goes somewhere else. So I would ask for serious consideration specifically around the stormwater issue and whether it's additional grates on the property. I know that there are some properties where they even put grates on the driveway, so if you're going to run that driveway up and down the property, we really have to do something about it. And, the mosquitoes and Zika virus and all sorts of other stuff that you hear about in the news. I've got 3 small kids. We're out in the yard all the time. I know that the neighborhood has a ton of kids around it, so certainly any way to eliminate that and make, the highest and best use of the property for all the concerned citizens, I think that'd be appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. Kip, this is the second time around. So
I'd just like to add to that, because I appreciate what Mr. West is saying, but it's not enough. And we have just been through this, the Besslers are my immediate neighbors, and they have gone through extensive stormwater work, and we still have stormwater coming off the property onto the neighboring property. So, I suppose one can engineer anything, but it isn't sufficient, and it will affect the neighbors. That's just the truth. And so I'm very concerned about additional stormwater to everyone around the property.
Can I just add one thing to that as well? So I've been in my house for 12, Roxanne List. So I've been in my house for 12 years, and when we purchased our house, we're down on the corner of Valley and Jefferson, and all of our walls were bowed. We've had to anchor all of our walls. We've had to do extensive drainage on the outside as well as on the inside. We have drains in the backyard. We have them now connected to the sewer lines. So water issues are huge, and that does need to be addressed, because the neighbors that are closer to Valley are the ones who end up getting the brunt of the ones coming down, and I'm sure it extends to the back as well. But we've had to do extensive work to our house just because of the water issues.
Okay, thank you. All right, I think I'm going to close the public portion.
If I could I just put somebody on to address one or two of the points made?
Yes, please.
If you could, Bob, if you could address the comment regarding...
Mike, please.
Bob, if you could, address the stormwater comments or concerns?
Yes, well, earlier I said that we would agree to the conditions that Mr. West indicated in his memo, and Jack will acknowledge I'm working in town on a few properties, and the municipality is very concerned about stormwater runoff, and they look very closely at individual plans for development on individual lots. So we would address any concerns that the municipal engineer would bring up, and we would control the runoff so that there was no adverse impact on adjoining neighbors, either through connecting to the municipal system or dry well systems or whatever was appropriate.
And regarding the interpretation of lot width, which was discussed.
I would just disagree with the definition Mr. Cohen put forward, that any line that changes alignment ceases to be a side lot line. If you looked at our key map, for instance, on sheet 1 along Turner Court, there are a couple of lots, 9 and 10, 15 and 16, that have angles in their side lot line, which under his definition would then turn the back portion of that into a rear line. A continuous line to me would lead from the front to the rear. Municipality has a border line, which I'm sure is not a straight line from point to point, but yet it exists in every instance. So I would disagree with that definition that he put forward. That's it.
Okay.
No further questions.
All right. Did you want to sum up, or do you want to wait until the board has had discussion?
I can sum up now or wait, whatever the board prefers.
Just a question. I guess there's been you heard that there's an appeal pending on the definition of side yard that will be heard by the Zoning Board of Adjustment sometime in April, which is well beyond any time this board has to act on this application. I guess there was a suggestion, or at least, I'm not sure the board wants it, but just so the board knows the applicant's position, if it became relevant, would the applicant be willing to grant an extension so that it could act after the Zoning Board of Adjustment heard the appeal?
No, I'm sorry, that's not something the applicant can agree to for, I guess, a couple of reasons, and I'll just briefly summarize. One, we don't think there's any merit at all. We think the definition that was brought forward is just contorted at best, and we just disagree with it. The other point is jurisdictionally. I think if someone has a concern about how this board is interpreting it, they could certainly take an appeal ultimately to the court, and we think that's the forum, not necessarily to take the route that has been taken.
The answer is no.
Yes. Very succinct, but yes. No.
Okay. He said no, yes. It really is very hard to hear up here. I think we've heard so many sides of this and so on. Mr. Porter, the first thing is that what's before us is the plan that we were sent. Is that correct? It's not necessarily these variations that we've been shown.
I guess the original plan that Lee showed us on PB1 is the application, and that's what's before the board. In considering that the board may want to consider alternatives, but technically the application before the board is the one that came in under the deadline and is either conforming or not conforming, depending on what the board determines is the definition or the intent of the ordinance.
And the alternative that was brought up tonight is not conforming, is that correct? Conforming.
Well, it would require variances.
Okay. So...
Mr. Goldberg agrees that that's the case.
If under the current zoning, yes.
Okay. So is there any further board discussion on this?
I have a question. So we are voting on whether we think this is a conforming application or not, or can you just give some clarity as to what's before the board to decide?
Perhaps. Yeah, I guess we've heard that there is the application with the zigzag line that we've also heard that is arguably conforming. There seems to be a general consensus that staff didn't like it to begin with and still doesn't like it, but the test isn't whether we like it. It's for the board to determine what legally it can do with that application. And its conformity has to do with either the definition of the division line as Mr. Cohn has presented it, or whether this board, in light of the history of this application, the action by the governing body in changing the ordinance, the so-called race to get it in under the wire, whether all those considerations are such that the board must abide by that, or whether the board can hang its decision on a determination which it would have to make in terms of the applicability of 10B 182, and whether that design standards can be interpreted to make, in the context of all of the jockeying of timing that we've heard about, that came in under the wire, and the race to the courthouse, whether all of those considerations can be taken into account by the board in determining that this, because of the design standard, which has been on the books, which the applicants' experts acknowledged was there and they were aware of. They may not have been aware of its applicability or how it would impact on this application. I think that's a decision for the board. The board needs to determine if it's if it determines that all things considered it's a conforming application, then it needs to be approved unless then the board then wants to look at an alternative which might also be non-conforming, but it might determine to be better than the zigzag line. So just to go back, in the other application where we saw the zigzag line before the zone, it would be for the subdivision committee, the board determined that the alternative was better than the zigzag line, albeit having problems. The question of height and all the things that developed once the lot was approved, there is no site plan approval, so those, most of the discussion about that is now about how it looks rather than the line and whether that was rational.
I have a follow-up question, which is, what, if we were to approve some variant of something, what kinds of conditions can the board put on a approval?
I think it has a lot of discretion then in imposing conditions, perhaps such as the ones that Dr. Hedaya has outlined as possible ones. Once there's a variance, the ability to impose conditions is a lot greater. I mean, is anything that's rational.
Right. In the case of the Valley Road application, what the full board saw was something that had been sent to our professionals and had been examined by them between the subdivision hearing and the time that this board approved it. Whereas here we're looking at something that's really a sketch without any sort of professional opinion. So does that make it a viable option?
I think we can structure it with an extension if that were the issue of that the board had either didn't act or agreed to consider in the interim as the alternative and come back with conditions so that the board at a future meeting could have staff input and possible conditions on an alternative before, and then the board could determine whether it wanted to approve the so-called conforming application, deny the so-called conforming application, or whether it would like to approve the application with variances and with staff review and a set of conditions that applicant might work out in advance so that the board could determine that that might be a more viable option.
Yes, you want?
Well, do you want us to just tell us our opinions now? Okay.
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 There's no motion pending.
Okay, well, this is my opinion. The lot lines are not drawn to be practicable for good design or for good development patterns. Therefore, I do not consider them practicable. Most of the arguments about fairness sound to me like two wrongs make a right, not what is fair. Jefferson Road is one of Princeton's classic streets, and a house in front of another house would mar that classic character. So I do not think this is conforming.
Okay. Anyone else want to try an opinion?
Julie Capozzoli, I agree with Jenny, and I have to say I'm very confused about how side lots are determined, and how flag lots are determined, and I just think that, given this information, I can't with confidence vote that this is conforming.
Yes, Mr. Quinn.
I'd like to add that I think this reinforces the wisdom of the subcommittee approach that we took here, and it was clear that the concerns that were articulated by the subcommittee members were also reinforced by the whole board. And I have to say, personally, I was disappointed with how the alternative was presented. I was expecting that we would see a fully formed alternative plan for this, not just the same plan put to a bigger audience. So that, again, is a personal observation.
Anyone else? Ms. Ullman?
Well, can I ask a question of those of you who have just spoken? Are you then saying that this particular configuration doesn't make much sense, aside from the fact that it does seem to conform if you disregard the complaints about the measurements, but that you would be willing to consider an alternative that was still divided it still into two lots, if you could be sure that on the front lot, the house was set back at the same distance as the others? I mean, I'm trying to figure out what
would be acceptable.
What would be acceptable, what we can do. I mean, we're operating both in terms of what we like and in what the law tells us we must or may or shall do. And I frankly don't know where the heck I'm standing in there. I don't like the idea of dividing it into two lots because it seems to jam things in. On the other hand, if you look, there are a number in this area that have already done it, and there's certainly more that will do it. We have obviously not been happy with the Valley Road pair, but we did not see, as I recall, on the subdivision that we approved here, we did not see any indication of where the houses would be located or what they would look like. So we got we got what we got. If we could control where at least the first house on this divided lot went, maybe we would be more open to approving, but can we do that? I mean, all I'm doing is expressing total concern about making a decision that is both stands up legally, but respects and responds to what we want our neighborhoods to look like. So there.
Okay. Anyone else?
I guess I agree with most of what I've heard from my peers, but there's something that jumps on top of all of that each time each of you finish speaking, and that is because the application as presented tonight with the two houses, which obviously I don't prefer, but the application came in before the current ordinance was, and that to me means they have a right to build the units as presented, as of right, because there are no zoning variances required.
But can I ask you what about the 180, the line, the practicable line?
Well, if I could finish.
Okay, sorry.
So that even before I get to the line part of it, that's, they can build these units as of right, because the application came in before the current ordinance existed. I do have a problem with the discussion regarding the continuous line. Obviously, I at least follow our experts' lead, the people we rely on to make decisions and guide us. I have no reason to doubt David, it's just that I don't know the difference. Sitting here, I can't say I agree with staff or I agree with David. So, I would, under those circumstances, I'm going with staff. I got to tell you.
Why don't you ask the staff what they think of what I said, David?
Well, because, I could, but it's unfortunate, I guess, that Derek isn't here. But if you could speak to that, I would appreciate it.
Either myself or Lee can address that. And basically, I've had numerous conversations with Derek regarding this. And the interpretation is that continuous does not mean that it can't have an angle point in it. Obviously, this is the extreme, but we have lots all over town that have angle points. And it's never been interpreted that once you have that angle point, it's no longer a side lot line. If you look at the definitions in the ordinance, also for lot frontage, it has that same word, continuous. So if you interpreted that an angle point means it's not continuous, then you would have that, apply that same definition for lot frontage. And again, you have lots all over town where there's an angle point in the front yard, and would make those lots non-conforming. So Derek's interpretation is that, it doesn't mean that continuous doesn't mean that you can't have an angle point. And my understanding is the prior zoning officer also had that same interpretation. I've been doing this for a lot of years, and I've never seen that interpretation where because there's an angle point, it means you're changing, it doesn't meet the definition of side lot line.
David, it's part of the public.
Let me just ask, Jack, David's presentation of no change is the extreme, correct? I mean, is there a point at which it goes back and forth a number of times and it becomes non-contiguous?
And how do you tell the difference?
Well, we're more deliberations.
Yeah, there's not a set, when does it become a rear line versus a side line, but the way you look at it is, looking at how the lot sits, and again, this is the extreme, I'm not trying to justify this lot, it was done to beat the ordinance, but typically, side lot lines and front lines do have angle points.
But do they have right angle points? I mean, to me, it's like the square, it's almost nearly a right angle.
But there's no definition of whether it's a 90-degree change or a 1-degree change, it doesn't, make that difference. What Mr. Cohen is saying is once you change it 1 degree, then it's no longer a side lot line. So that's where I would disagree with that interpretation.
Okay. Mr. Hoffman?
Is there an argument that it can have some flex and rather than no flex? I mean, no, I'll withdraw that.
Okay. Does anyone else want to say something about this?
I'll say something. Being a freshman here, there's still some rules I still need to understand, but I must say I am particularly swayed to go in line with Kip Cherry's concerns, and which was very well articulated and also supported by the neighbors. So many concerns, including that the proposed subdivision here does not fit into the character of the neighborhood, and other issues that came up regarding concerns about increasing the density and the water runoff issues. So that being said, my decision will certainly support what the neighbors have articulated.
Let me just say that this is a subdivision application, and we need some of the issues that have been raised are site plan issues and might not support a denial of a subdivision because of those other concerns. Many of those concerns may be addressed by imposing conditions. So the board needs to be careful in its rationale for its vote in terms of legitimate grounds for denying a subdivision, if that's the direction the board is headed.
Thanks for that clarification. I appreciate it.
And if I could just interject for just one thing, just again to reiterate, the applicant is certainly happy to, entertain and discuss with the board something that it would find appropriate. However, what was presented tonight, the PB1, is a by right application.
I'm struggling with this, just like the rest of the board. And, you look at the drawing of those lines, and it's hard to say that that would be intended by any zoning ordinance written by any rational person. And I believe that that's the 182, is it 182 or 128? The 182 is a way of articulating why I can't imagine any planner, anybody saying this is what we want to have. And even if you look at the map of the neighborhood with the flag lots, nothing looks like this. And I would like to get some assurance that saying that the 182 provision is reason enough to deny this, because I think all of us feel that this is not compliant with our zoning, and I just want to make sure that we're making a decision that's going to stand up.
Let me say there's no assurance. Only a court after the fact could provide that. Let me say I think there is a rationale for applying 10B 182 in the totality of the facts and the history of the application and the township rezoning. That is perhaps the best argument that could be provided and to support a denial, but there's certainly no assurance, and I can tell you that that is sustainable. But there's the whole context of, I think you articulated it quite well in looking at it and saying it's not rational, and that 10B 182 may not be stand on its own, but it is a rational design standard, and somewhere between there and here is an argument to be made in that direction. If the board's not comfortable with that, then I think just maybe the question wasn't asked, but assumed, what could the board do to, what action can the board take that is not headed to litigation, that may produce a result that provides better assurance than either just voting something up or voting something down. And I guess that would be to withhold action tonight, to allow the applicant to work with staff on either the alternative we saw or a different alternative with a set of conditions that as to house locations, size of house, height of house, setback, how the driveway will function, what the drainage characteristics would be, and that would come back to the board with probably a set of documented standards that the board could consider and determine if that alternative subdivision, which would be 2 lots and 2 houses with a set of restrictions, is a better alternative than voting the subdivision down on grounds that may or may not be legally sustainable.
Well, can I ask the other board members for a straw poll? Because I'd like to just deem it non-conforming, but I don't know if and it seems like some people want to deem it non-conforming and others don't.
No, I don't.
I think it'd be in the best interest to wait until the neighbor's appeal to the zoning board is heard before. I don't really have clarity about whether this is a conforming lot or not. I don't see how we can make that determination when we know that the neighbors have appealed and that there's a date on the schedule for that to be heard. I mean, we could ask the applicant to go through the expense of showing us what he has in mind that we might approve, but if the zoning board rules that it's not conforming lot, then everyone's wasted more time and more money. So I certainly can't, in good conscience, vote on this for approval tonight.
So you feel like the side lot line provision 10B 182 doesn't, you're not sure enough about it?
Oh, I'm sure about that.
Because, well, according to that, then that's enough to deem it non-compliant.
Is it?
Yeah. Well, it is in my opinion, but I mean, if
that issue is ultimately going to be decided by the board. You've heard my opinion that it's relevant. Only a court can tell us whether, on the totality of the facts, denial on that grounds would be sustained.
Then, sure. I mean, I raised without citing the ordinance, I raised the concerns in the ordinance at the subcommittee. So, sure, if we're talking about that, Jenny, then count me in.
Yeah, I mean, I think given that the zoning board's not going to act until sometime in April, and the board and the applicant has told us the extension is not going to run till then, the idea of waiting until it decides, particularly in light of Mr. West's, hearing Mr. West and his view, I think the appeal issue is not a basis on which the board should make its determination tonight.
Fair enough.
Yes, Ms. Ullman.
Well, I think sometimes you just have to sort of step out of the lines, and I guess I've said I don't like this particular configuration. I would be much happier if we could find a way of working with the applicant to come up with a plan that that responded to at least some of the comments that both the board and the neighbors have made. I realize this leaves the applicant in a kind of a never land, and you might well walk away or sue or do something. But if there were a way that we could, with staff, or with somebody, figure out a way of getting a better plan. I would love to aim in that direction rather than being sort of hard-nosed one way or the other.
But you would feel that the applicant has a right to make it, or to divide it into two lots?
Well,
that's the inherent.
Right?
Yes, that's the.
I mean, I think
that's where we started.
I don't see that as being a real question. It's a question more of how he does it.
Okay, all right, but let's just start it with the fact that if we worked with the applicant, we would end up with a subdivision of this lot. Is that correct? And that you would like to see something well-designed, perhaps houses of a size consistent with the neighborhood, size, height, setback, and so on, and as close to the prevailing setback as possible. Is that where you're going, or?
I mean, if I'm allowed to go there, that's where I would go. If I'm allowed to go there, that's where I would go, and I don't know whether, I don't even know whether you can do it, but that's where I am.
If the applicant grants an extension, the board, if inclined, could just carry the application to allow the applicant to work with staff and perhaps a subcommittee of the board in presenting an alternative subdivision with a site plan, which we don't otherwise have the power to require, so that it came back as a package which the board could then vote up or down.
That's implied.
And rather than tonight deciding up or down on the two-lot subdivision if it's granted, not knowing what the houses are going to look like or exactly where their footprints would be. So that would be, I think, if your question, Ms. Owen, was how do we get from here to there, that would be an alternative.
Yeah.
I'm not quite where you are yet with that it's obvious that this lot should be subdivided, and I'm still struggling with that piece, because...
Just without interrupting, my restatement that does enforce that issue. That is, it was to allow time to see what that alternative was, and then to make a determination whether it's approved or not.
Okay.
But are you saying, if there's no right to subdivide, why don't we just say that right now? Is that what you're kind of asking, or?
I'm still struggling with looking at this map. There's several other lots that look very similar to this size and shape, and I think that was probably what was intended. And in order to subdivide this, you have to draw a crazy line, which I think is very hard to say was intended by the zoning, and there's language in the zoning that indicates it's not intended. So I'm not there that it's an obvious thing where this is allowed. And then I do agree with Ms. Carmeller, then, why are we going through the motion of continuing to divide it? But I'm still trying to figure it out.
And again, you asked for assurance that would stand, and
the more we talk, the more confused I get. Okay? I need to say that. According to my understanding of this application, because it does not need any variances, and because the application was submitted to the municipality before the current ordinance was filed or was approved, the applicant has a right to subdivide. Am I wrong?
don't think that's a yes or no. Let me just say, let me give some history. We've got a we used to have a time of decision rule, which we talked about before. And and under that old law, what often happened was an applicant bought property, designed a subdivision or a site plan, took it well toward the application stage, and municipalities could then look at it and say, oh, we didn't realize that's what the ordinance allowed, we're going to change the ordinance. And the courts determined that that was unfair. And the fairness was then corrected by the time of application rule. But the time of application rule wasn't necessarily meant to give an applicant a time to get under the window, under the wire, to present a plan when they already knew that the ordinance was being changed. So there's fairness and there's fairness, and I think that's contextual. And this isn't an application where it's unfair to change the rules, maybe. It may be that there's fairness on either side. So historically, that's some background. It doesn't answer the question of whether this is or is not a conforming application, but to the extent you're saying, well, it's really unfair, they met the clock, somebody could say it's unfair because, it takes time for an ordinance to be developed and enacted, and certain things come in under the wire. So that's contextual. In terms of definitively saying this meets it and therefore be unfair, whether without that other background, there is a rationale that the mayor has, I guess, enunciated and says, well, I look at this and I look at 10B 182, I can't believe that 10B 182 is irrelevant given the fact that this doesn't look like a rational lot line division except for the technicalities of how you measure lot width and those things that we've corrected in our ordinance. So there's an argument that says, again, the totality of the facts, all things considered, the board would be rational in determining that this is, whatever it is, the applicant isn't entitled to rely on the fact that it may be technically conforming, but it's not conforming when one introduces design standards.
That said, my preference would be to get an extension, have the applicant get an extension, and then work with staff to try to come up with something that is, for lack of anything else, better than what we've seen tonight, that would probably take care of some of the concerns that have been shared.
And let me just say, if whatever that produces, I think it's not going to turn on lot lines. It's going to turn on footprints and other limitations on the actual structures. We're not sure what those lot lines are going to look like, but we're then talking more like form-based zoning of what we see.
So I have a question along those lines, so this is a theoretical question, but if we were to move down that path, could some of the conditions be put on that front house for things like having the garage on the side of the house, narrowing the width of the driveway, those sorts of conditions, or would those be inappropriate for this?
No, I think once we're talking about conditions, we're almost talking about come back with a site plan for this acreage, which may have lot lines on it that, whatever they look like, they need variances, but we're going to see in advance a site plan of what the development of these two houses, presumably under that plan, would look like, or what maybe it's sacrilegious to say, what a two-family house might look like on this lot.
Well, no, this is not a two-family zone.
Right, I mean, it needs variances. So the question then becomes whether it's, well, whatever comes back, working with staff and a subcommittee might generate.
I have another legal question. What about section 10B-164? It says compliance with division, subdivisions, ... shall be designed so as to encourage good development patterns within the municipality. Can't we say this does not do that? I don't think anyone says that this development encourages good design patterns. It's not in the same pattern, and the whole, one of the main features in a classic neighborhood like that is, the conformity of the lots.
The difficulty is that courts like to look at subdivision ordinances and conditional use provisions as giving guidance sufficient to know how the applicant is going to come out the other end of the application process. And good design may be in the eyes of the beholder. It's not it's more subjective than objective, and I think to the extent we can rely on objective standards in dealing with this tonight, we're on firmer ground. If we're, again, looking for rationales, then we can look beyond the objective standards.
Well, we seem to have at least three differing positions that people are taking at this point.
May I summarize them?
Yes.
I guess one alternative is to vote to approve the application as submitted. A second alternative is to deny the application as submitted. And the third is to something other than either of those, and the one thing that we've identified is asking the staff and the applicant and a subcommittee to work with a proposed site plan with locations and design of structures for two houses somehow configured on two lots in this space.
Alan, is it fair to say April 7th is the board's next hearing?
No, March 17th.
Not a matter of fairness, but it's whatever our schedule is.
Which board? This board?
This board, yes.
Well, I'm not sure what time it takes to do what that third alternative is.
Our next meeting is the 17th.
But staff has to look at the plans and review them so we've adequate time.
Well, and we're talking about not just submitting plans, but working out a whole design. We could be talking about just submitting plans, but one alternative is talking about a whole design project for this space, showing locations and the like, whatever a subcommittee of the board and staff and the applicant want to work on or feel is a viable plan. So in short, those, I think, are at least three alternatives.
Okay.
Maybe look at a date at, say, like April 7th?
No, let's leave dates out for the moment. Just, I don't know, we have any consensus.
Yeah, that's not this. All right. What would you all like to do at this point? Do you want to vote on each one of these, or do you want to
Maybe that's the simplest, since everybody's quiet.
Okay. Yeah, do you want to make a motion?
I'll second. I'll make a motion that we do whatever Alan said. Number three.
Number three.
Which is actually to table action tonight.
That'll work.
To create a subcommittee,
Create a subcommittee.
to work with applicant and staff, to come back with a proposed alternative with a site plan attached, and defining the variances that presumably that alternative will require, and to bring that back to the board, at which time the board will still have all its alternatives available.
That's what I said.
Lee?
But it's clear that you're permitting 2 dwellings on the property then. Let's make certain there's consensus on that, otherwise it's pointless to go and meet with them.
Definitely not. I'm not agreeing that there's 2 dwellings.
But if you're doing the
I just want everybody to
alternative
know.
3, you're basically saying...
My motion means 2 dwellings on the
I
property.
just wanted to clarify. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, and there was a second, was that Fern?
I'll second.
Fern second.
Yeah, I second.
Okay.
And I guess that alternative requires some extensions of time, and the applicant being willing to work in that direction. Mr. Goldberg?
Sure, I mean, as said multiple times, we are happy to try to work with the board to come up with something that works, that the board would prefer. I mean, it's been said, absolutely. What I'd like to do, I'm sorry.
Because there is a motion.
Okay,
Is it seconded?
For the second.
is there
Yes, we have a second.
further, what?
There was a second, yeah.
I can't hear.
There was a second.
Yes. Fern?
I have a question, if there's a timeline for that proposal to come back to the board, and what happens if there's not agreement, or if there's difficulties with that? Are we then giving up? For some of us, we're still on the fence and are we giving up the sense that it could, that the zoning really does just allow for 1 building there?
Okay. The motion as stated, I understand, to leave all the options still open for the board. The question is timing. If we're aiming for a meeting, why don't we do this? Let me suggest, what are our meeting dates in April?
In April, it's the 7th
7th
and the
and
21st. Problem with the 7th is I have an ordinance referral already coming to us, and there's a zone change being discussed that same night, and there's one other major discussion. So the night of the 7th is already booked.
So what's the next
Maybe
date?
the 21st.
That's when the one we didn't hear tonight is coming back.
So the request would be to aim to come back for the meeting of the 21st, but to request an extension of time past that, so that if we don't come back, then the clock doesn't run out. So an extension till the April 28th, with the goal of coming back, having a plan ready to come back and be noticed and all for a meeting on the 21st of April. Just in terms of...
Right. But then if we need an extension past the 21st, it would have to be to our next meeting, which would be May 5th.
Okay, then to May 5th.
Actually, Alan, what I prefer to do is to April 22nd. I mean, I'm hoping we can wrap it up by April 21st, and if we can't, then we can deal with it then.
Well, I think the hope is, what the board wants to not do is be under the gun on an extension running out. So I would go with Ms. Catronio's suggestion that we do the 5th, which is the meeting after the 17th.
Meeting following.
We'd really prefer to April 22nd.
I know what you prefer. I think we'll put a time, we'll state a time, and if you're not agreeable, then we won't do that alternative.
First, this has to pass. First, this motion has to...
Yeah. I mean, this motion has to pass, obviously, which we don't know the vote on yet. So may we include in the motion that it's aiming to have something ready to come back to the board by the 21st of April with an extension through the 5th of May? No.
I mean, I'm just perplexed as to why it can't be April 22nd. I mean, I truly don't understand why.
Because I guess if we can't get it, let's say we get to the 21st, and there's another application ahead of you, and we don't get it done, and time runs out the next day, the board's really under the gun to act, and I don't want the board to be under the gun to act.
But it's the same situation you're in tonight. I mean, it's the same type of situation.
Well, the board will know where it is, and knows where it is tonight. It doesn't want to create that situation. It has it already. There's a motion that the mayor isn't fully formed and that isn't voted on. I mean, I don't know that this motion is going to carry.
Dan, if you could, maybe just give us a minute or two to discuss it.
Okay. We're going to break at 11.
Understood. If that's okay.
You look like you're about to
How
dissolve.
will this affect the Stein?
I don't know. It's different.
So this would be the last one that would, right. Mm-hmm. Right. So we're basically restricted.
Yeah, like,
Discretion
yeah, like
and individual
we won't
voters.
have any, if they do it that just says, yes, you,
Full compliance.
this is, then we have no input.
Right. So looking at that, our question, I guess, goes back to our... The issue she was question was, the real question was whether or not we think that's compliant, not whether or not we like it.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
It wouldn't work. Right. I don't know,
So pretty much all the issues that the public gave, all their concerns go out the window.
discuss this off the
We're
record?
left to just, whether or not we feel
Dwayne.
that's in compliance. I'm sorry.
Back on the record.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everyone, go to the back. Okay.
Yeah. For tonight, I've heard what everybody said. If the consensus and if the board were to agree that there will be two lots, then yes, we can go beyond that date.
That's the motion with the understanding, but it's, when it comes back on the 17th, the motion is that all the options are still before the board, including the denial of the subdivision.
They're not. They're not.
This is an extension of time to work out an alternative for the board to consider in the context of whether to approve a subdivision or to deny a subdivision. Well, it's in the context of then having two alternatives. One, denying the subdivision, or two, approving what the committee brings back as a subdivision. The understanding, if the alternative the committee is going to talk about is a two-lot subdivision, but that the board retains the right to deny the subdivision. If I'm stating that correct for the maker of the motion.
Yeah, I mean, certainly the applicant agrees to April 22nd. I mean, there's no argument there. Going beyond May 5th, then no, the applicant doesn't agree to that. It's a situation where the bottom line throughout all of this is that this is a situation that has multiple issues going through it. As I said earlier, I firmly believe that there is no basis whatsoever for the interpretation of of lot width as was articulated by others. I am not, the client...
Let me be clear that the timing we're talking about is really not related to that zoning decision.
But I think it kind of is. I mean, I don't think there's any jurisdiction for it, but it's just one more battle for it, and there's just no need for it. And we can see where we stand on April 21st. I still, honestly, and I'm not trying to be hard, because I genuinely want to work, and the applicant genuinely wants to work with the board, but I genuinely don't understand what the issue would be. If we get here on April 21st, and we feel that we're progressing and we're moving in the right direction, then we can certainly talk about things. If it's a situation where we have put together what we believe is the greatest alternative plan known to mankind, and you're looking at it like, this isn't what you want, well, maybe that says something too. But you certainly have through April 21st to take whatever actions the board deems appropriate. Whether we agree with it or not is a different matter, but you can certainly do that on April 21st as you can tonight.
I have a question. Can we remove from this motion the stipulation that there be two lots and two structures on the site, and leave open the possibility of a multifamily single structure on the site? Is that...
I won't remove it from my motion. You can make your own.
Yeah, we don't do that.
Thank you.
Okay, it's just about 11 o'clock. If, Mr. Porter, do you...
Let me just...
But he said they're not necessarily making it. But he said no.
I'm going to call the question very soon.
Okay.
We will agree to it without...
He's negotiating it.
If the motion passes, we will agree to unlimited extension, because they already give us two houses, we can't prove that. Okay. Just to limit the agree on the motion as it is, two lots. We already said it, Jack, two lots. We will just do whatever they want.
We could turn it down.
That's all right.
The motion is to make two lots. You can't come back and say this one needs one.
Okay.
What she says, getting an extension to the 22nd will give us the time on the
All right,
21st.
let's go with that and call the question.
Well, yeah. Ms. Catronio looked at the schedule, assuming everything whatever work is to be done can be done such that staff has an application, everything to review and by the 10th, so that we can hear it on the 21st, an extension through the 22nd
The
will
10th
give
of
us...
March.
Hmm?
The 10th of March.
You don't mean-
Material has to get to staff by the 10th of March to give them the time to review it, then we had to set up the committee. I need the steps.
We're talking about April, for the April...
April 21st to come to the full board, but the applicant needs to submit the plans by the 10th of March.
No, that's not going to work, because it's not submitting plans, it's working with staff on plans to be submitted to the full board on the 21st, so it's not like a new application. Is staff comfortable with...
What I envision is one drawing that shows what the lot lines will be, and then a list of conditions that...
How about a site plan?
Well, it'll show the house, and, one of the conditions will be, if we want to limit the size of the house equivalent to the neighbors, but the list of conditions are, you wanted a side entry garage, you wanted the setback equal to the existing houses in the neighborhood, things like that. It's really just going to be a list of conditions.
But it's going to show the footprint and a set of design conditions, right?
Right. But, obviously, we have to meet with whatever subcommittee you have to discuss it.
And that's the applicant's understanding of what it would be submitting, right? And working with staff and a subcommittee to determine. And
Absolutely, we would work with the subcommittee, professional staff, absolutely.
I need a deadline from staff to get all the material in so they can have the meetings.
Come on,
let's just work first with the dates we have, and then we'll work internally as to timing. So there is a motion that's been seconded, but not...
Can you just refresh, the exact motion is what exactly, Alan?
To table the action tonight, with the expectation that the applicant will work with staff, submit a revised subdivision plan with footprints of buildings, with a set of conditions, design standards that address issues of how this will fit into the neighborhood, and have that in a format that it can be submitted to the full board for action on the 21st of April, with the subcommittee meeting with staff as well.
And the board retains...
And yes,
it's
it will be a tabling action, so we understand, just so we'll say it again, whatever that shows and whatever good faith went into that process, this board is retaining jurisdiction to deny the subdivision.
Okay.
And you're assuming a subcommittee of the board also?
Yes.
So I think anyone who votes in favor should, we have to figure out who...
That we'll deal with. That's it.
Okay.
The chairman.
Do you want to call the question on that motion?
Ms. Capizoli?
Yes.
Ms. Crumiller?
No.
Mayor Lempert?
Yes.
Ms. Sproul?
Yes.
Mrs. Trotman?
Yes.
Mrs. Ullman?
Yes?
Mrs. Gunning?
Yes.
Mr. Quinn?
No.
Mr. Williamson?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Okay,
Everyone?
thank you.
I move to adjourn.
Did I hear a second to
Yes,
that?
the mayor.
I object to the motion to adjourn. I'm joking. Don't put that on No, I think we just punched
after I take this off the subcommittee.
Congratulations.
No, I honestly, you know what? I think that I remember that first idea.